How hardcore is truck repair in Pakistan? Initially scrapped, a truck's rear axle was restored to its original condition. How did they manage to do it? This artistic truck had one end of its rear axle resting on the ground, causing the vehicle to lean heavily. To prevent it from tipping over, the workers dug out the sand behind the truck and then used a jack to prop up the rear end. After ensuring everything was secure, the experienced technician slid under the truck to support the chassis, lifting it until the vehicle was fully balanced. Once the truck was raised high enough, they didn't need to remove the tires to push them out quickly since the half shaft had already broken and the rear axle tube had snapped due to inertia. While this situation might make others shake their heads, the workers confidently assured that they could fix it and promised the owner that the truck would be road ready by the end of the day. In just 2 hours, they removed the entire rear axle. However, fixing this kind of axle isn't something anyone can do. Within a 100-kilometer radius, only the shop run by Uncle Glasses has the skill for it, and the price is affordable, just 2,000 rupees, making it accessible to everyone. The team quickly devised a repair plan, replaced the damaged axle tube with a second-hand one. Though this sounds simple, the process is far from easy. First, they needed to cut off the damaged part of the axle tube. The damaged tube was cut off in less than half an hour, but they couldn't proceed with the splice immediately. Since the cut surfaces were uneven, the second-hand tube had to be mounted on a lathe for machining to ensure a perfect joint. Following their principle of waste not, want not, they never discard any usable metal. The flange part, in particular, was a treasure to them, so cutting it off was a must. After cutting the flange, they used a hammer to tap it 3 times evenly on both sides, dislodging it easily. The flange was again placed on the lathe for further machining until its outer diameter reached the desired size. Next, they machined a groove and prepared the inset portion with high precision, ensuring an error margin within millimeters. Before splicing, they also machined a beveled edge at the joint to make a weld seam. Once everything was ready, they measured the dimensions with calipers to ensure the sizes matched the original truck, preventing issues like tire wear later on. After checking for concentricity, they proceeded with the welding. The 2 workers worked in sync, one handling the welding while the other rotated the axle on the stand. After several rounds of careful welding, the seam looked flawless, as if it had never been welded. It was so well done that it would last until the axle wore out. Next, they moved on to installing it back onto the truck. Because the rear axle was quite heavy, multiple workers coordinated the installation. 2 lifted the axle to the correct height, while the others used a jack to align it with the steel plates. Once everything was aligned, they secured it with U-bolts. These steel plates could support a mountain, but weren't overburdened for such a small rear axle. Installing the rear axle wasn't too complicated. It was just that many accessories were involved. After securing the axle, they installed the differential. Before this, the technician had already applied sealant at the connection points, so all that was left was to pry it back into place and bolt it down. Although they didn't use an impact wrench, the 2 workers worked seamlessly together, getting everything bolted down quickly. Next came the brake system installation, starting with the brake caliper. It was relatively easy to install, only needing a few bolts. Once the caliper was in place, they moved on to the brake shaft and pad bracket. During installation, the brake shaft had to connect to the caliper's push rod, which operates the brake pads during braking. With the brake pad base secured, they installed the pads, though the trickiest part was installing the return springs. Once the brake system was set up, they installed the bearings. The technician carefully applied fresh grease, liberally slathering it on as if it were free. Since the brake drum and hub were already connected, they installed the tires and brake drum together, which made the process quicker and more efficient. They used specialized tools to tighten the axle nut by feel. Finally, the half shaft was installed, and the artistic truck was fully repaired. Kudos to the workers for their incredible craftsmanship.